Dzień dobry Państwu, good morning, welcome. I think we will be having the session in English. I believe this is the best idea because we are having all the foreign participants, and I hope it's not a problem for you. Those who need a translation, please just pick up the hands-free. My name is Małgorzata Bonikowska. I represent the think tank called the Center for International Relations from Warsaw, the oldest independent think tank specializing in foreign affairs in Poland, 25 years. One of the things we cover, one of the topics of our research and work is energy. And of course, that's the topic of our panel today. Big question, is the green development and generally all the green transformation a chance, an opportunity for our region, Central Eastern Europe, or not? Or maybe that's a problem, a headache. Wow. So let us welcome, first of all, our panelists. Let me start from the panelists from the region. Online, we have Šárka Shoup. Šárka, are you with us? Do you hear me?
Yes. Good afternoon or good evening.
Great. Šárka is online, is speaking from Czech Republic. She's the CEO of the Institute for Politics and Society. Thanks a lot for being with us online. I hope you are able to follow the discussion. Then we have our guest from Lithuania, Karolina Mickutė.
Good afternoon. Yeah, thank you for having me here.
Yes, Karolina is a senior researcher in the Lithuanian Institute for Free Market in Vilnius, right? Great. So Czech Republic, Lithuania, and Hungary. Let me welcome Andrea Virág. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, thank you for having me.
And Andrea is a strategy director in the Republikon Institute. As you can see, all our guests are from think tankers, analysts, researchers. And we have two guests from the other side of Europe. Let me start with Ricardo Silvestre. Hi, Ricardo. You may think he's an Italian, but he's a Portuguese. He comes from... he's representing a think tank called Movimento Liberal Social. Social liberal movement. All people, as you can guess, are liberal think tanks. So Portugal. And last but not least, definitely, is Christopher Gleadle, correct?
That's right. Thank you very much for having me.
He is a president, actually, of the Paddy Ashdown Forum coming from the UK. What a pity you are not anymore in the EU. Deep regret, but still welcome.
Thank you very much indeed. I do call my nationality as British European.
That's great to hear that. Right. So let me start by putting to all the panelists this initial question. And then maybe we'll start with Šárka, as far as the online participation is always a little bit more difficult. How do you see now, after what happened to us, meaning, pandemic, then the war, and then finally, the wave of this huge economic and energy crisis, how do you see this issue of green development? Is this something which is now in question because people are worried? Or on the other way around, it is really a process which is speeding up in very practical terms? Yes, please, Šárka.
Thank you for this question, and also thank you for having me at this discussion. I hope you hear me. The general consensus of Europe and the Czech Republic is that the legislation should support green development. I hear the echo. Do you hear it?
Yeah, it's a little bit, but let's continue. So you said basically that it should support, the legislation should support it, right?
Yes, should support green development, even throughout the current energy crisis. And if anything, the later edition has only encouraged the need to increase the domestic energy supply. And the Czech Republic or the Czech government has stood by the notion that both more energy and more sustainable energy can be accomplished at this time. And this notion of green growth has gained major traction throughout Europe, exemplified by sustainable energy-focused rulings like the EU's green taxonomy. And this proves that politicians back the concept of sustainable growth. For example, back in 2019, the original plan set by the Czech Coal Commission called for the fast phase out of coal used for electricity by 2038. And the plan suggested that much of the coal be replaced with natural gas as a transitional energy source. However, with the ongoing war in Ukraine and the coinciding energy crisis, such a strategy is no longer viable. Particularly thanks to the weaponization of natural gas materials from Russia and the sanctions the West has enacted. The short-term goal of the Coal Commission have now changed to prioritize reducing the dependency on foreign gas and oil supplies, seemingly at the cost of reducing the emphasis on sustainability. And yet, even though there is now greater demand for this, for low emission and renewable energy sources, it's also there's like less supply of natural gas, and the government of the Czech Republic is determined to not go back to the intense use of coal, but rather substitute it with other energy production methods, such as nuclear and renewable energy. And currently we have the Czech EU presidency, which intends to push the implementation of the European Commission's Repower EU plan that was presented in May, which aims to diversify energy sources and increases energy savings and accelerate the transition to low emission and renewable energy sources. So anyway, the fastest way to supplant the loss of a coal as a resource would be to reopen and expand nuclear plants, which, as many point out, are still wasteful in their own regard. However, the Czech government specifically explains that the use of nuclear energy is meant to be strictly transitional as the country continues to the major shift of using strictly renewable energy in a circular economy. And
let me stop here for a moment. Let's just have a panorama first, and then we'll have a discussion. Of course, I will encourage also the audience later on to participate, but let's first see where we are. Now let's move on to Lithuania. If you can tell us a little bit more about, how this influence of the war and energy crisis influences actually the situation in your country.
Just being here and listening to all the speeches, I suppose that what I want to represent in this discussion is that Lithuania, it quite early started to feel like the heavy breathing on the neck from Russia and I think that the whole situation, it only put extra fuel in the fire. So we have a huge bonfire mumbling regarding alternative energy. Just to put it into better context so we understand. It's always great to come back to Łódź. I love it. I love the people, I love the city, it's super exciting, but what I had the most luxurious experience yesterday, I plugged in my laptop, my phone, I heated up the electricity to have a heated floor, I turned on my TV, so I'm sort of like an electricity tourist because in Lithuania the prices are soaring so much because we only produce and cover 30% of our electricity needs. So we are dying for the need to increase our alternative energy, but instead of systemically reviewing the whole situation, Lithuanian politicians are focusing on giving direct injections, financial injections to establish the infrastructure. However, a crucial point in Lithuania is that according to all the private investors who would like to invest in alternative energy in Lithuania, is that they're simply discouraged because of the immense apparatus of the bureaucracy. They are completely discouraged because they have to wait too long. There are many gray zones, the terms are prolonged, so they just choose somewhere else to invest.
But from the legal point of view, the companies are encouraged and people are encouraged. Now, legally speaking, the green transformation is supported.
Actually, at the governmental level, it is agreed that this is the core priority in terms of dealing with the war. So entering the green development or making it faster is our measure of fighting the consequences of the war.
And do you have any discussion concerning that the people are afraid of doing this transformation right now in such a moment?
I'm actually hearing a lot of buzz going on that people are buying, distant solar panels. So it's totally a hype thing right now. I don't see any fear of it because it's like, it's the reality. Why be scared of it? Like, I think that unless like our enemies on social media are of course discouraging the independence of Lithuania energetically, but this is completely not the voice of the Lithuanians that I at least hear.
Well, I'm asking also because being a Pole, then I can present the Polish point of view on that. So we have a discussion actually, because we have a polarized society and also polarized political situation. So there are many voices saying, no, that's a completely wrong track. We should stick to coal, we should stick to the traditional energy sources, because, of course, this is what we have. And all this green transformation is not maybe the best idea, and that's the opinion of mostly, right-wing parties. And of course, liberal and the opposition parties say that it's the exactly opposite what we have to do. So that's the panorama in Poland. And maybe now...
Can I reflect just for a moment? We used to have a nuclear plant, and in this context, I would never think that I would say this, but having a nuclear plant is a luxury item because the European Union, politely urged us to close our nuclear plant down because it allegedly was built in the Soviet era. So in order to avoid Chernobyl II, we close it down. So we don't have the option of coal or any alternative, we don't have any alternatives to alternative energy.
Right, we do have coal, so that's something which is seen as strength. But we also talk about a nuclear plant, and that's something really very seriously taken. Okay, now Hungary. Let's see what's kind of discussion you have, Andrea, also taking into consideration then, regarding the government. Of course, Hungary is in a very specific situation, especially after the recent election, and a huge support for Prime Minister Orban. No, I'm asking about energy and,
Yes, of course, I'm quite happy to talk about the Hungarian political situation anytime, but to focus on energy, of course, the situation in Hungary is very similar that in other European countries when it comes to our energy dependency on Russia. And of course, Hungary is also very heavily dependent on non-renewable energy, and those, energy comes from Russia. So that's a problem that we have right now. The Hungarian energy situation is unique in a way that in 2012, the Hungarian government, Orban government, introduced a policy which main point was to put a price cap on utility prices, so on gas, electricity, and so on. So the Hungarian population wasn't encouraged at all to be, wise on using energy, on being green or anything like that, because it was very cheap to not be sustainable. So right now, of course, the situation is different, and the country has to rethink its energy policy, of course. There are different points of view when it comes to how should we move forward. We have a nuclear plant in Hungary. The government is planning on building a new one. Paks 2 is the name of that new nuclear plant. And the opposition doesn't support this plan. There are green parties who reject the idea of nuclear power plants altogether. And there are other parties, liberal parties as well, who they don't have a problem with nuclear energy, but that nuclear plant, Paks 2, is built by the Russians. So that wouldn't help reduce our energy dependence on Russia, because this is a very heavily overpriced Russia-dependent project. So that's where we stand now, and of course there is a huge debate on how to go forward.
Right, that's a big question mark for all of us in the sense of practical terms. And let me now move on into another side of Europe, and let's start with the EU member state, Portugal. And the same question would go to you, Ricardo. First of all, as far as what is happening in your country around that, because of course Portugal is far away from directly the Ukrainian-European border, let's say, but definitely it's also one of these countries, hit by the effects of the war as well.
Well, 30 seconds before that to thank For Liberty to having me here, and of course Liberty Foundation. Thank you all for coming. So good to see you there sitting, and please participate like our moderator was saying. Very quickly, is it a priority? It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 10. Absolutely. And I see that there's some work done, for example, the Polish Recovery and Resilience Plan focus on energy transition. So,
but we don't have money for this plan. We don't have money for this plan.
Well, technically it's the Next Generation EU fund money that comes to the Recovery and Resilience Plan. But it doesn't come for other reasons, I know. But let me try to give you then, because every time I come here, it's to do that to our Polish friends, to give you a perspective from someplace different. And bridging what we're saying, of course, it's priority 1, 2, 3 to 10, but now it's not enough to keep the lights on. So I'd like to bring a point to discussion and also to the rest of the panel and to the people here in the room, which is then how can we transition to a decarbonized economy? And in that point, I want to make the connection between Portugal and Poland, and that is we should be the guarantors of at least some transition with natural gas. And I know it's a polluting source with the port in Świnoujście. I hope I said that correctly. Thank you. And in Gdansk, and for example, in Lisbon.
But Ricardo, I wanted to ask this as a next question, what to do. But let's first, because for the people of the audience, in the audience, it can't be maybe so clear where Portugal is at the moment. Because, in the region, for us, it's a huge transition, right? But you are in the EU much longer. Maybe you're not a member, the founding member, but you joined the European Union a really long time ago. So share with us what is the effect of war and energy crisis on your thinking, what to do in your country first.
Perfect. That's the good moderator, focusing the debate. We are in a transition period, like Poland, like Hungary, in different system, of course, Lithuania. And our focus is to decarbonize as soon as possible. So to answer your question, that is our focus in Portugal. It's from the politicians, it's from the government, and it's from the population. The idea is to transit. That, because I'm not going to make my Polish friends really angry with me, we have a lot of sun, and it's very warm, and it's very good, and we have a lot of ocean, and a lot of wind. So we have that advantage, which is we are in a place in Europe where we can really go full tilt with a renewable energy. But still, I would like to come back, with your permission, to that point, which is also Portugal, Poland, we can be very important and at least maintaining some energy independence in these years as we go into a full non-polluting economy.
Thanks very much, Ricardo. Before we start also discussion with the audience, let me just go to the UK, because of course, from our perspective, you are on the north, and we know that also, it's a huge effort that the Nordic countries also, including the UK, are doing. It has been a while to implement the new sources of energy into the mix. What's the situation right now in the UK? And what is the effect of war, if any?
Oh yeah, there's an effect of the war. I can't obviously speak particularly from the government perspective this afternoon, because it may have changed this morning. But the main thing is... But do you
have still the Prime Minister?
Well, yeah, has the Prime Minister changed? I don't know. Is what it's actually... You see, the main impact of the war is, again, obviously on the prices. And it's because obviously the energy companies are just absolutely making so much money because the cost of production hasn't changed. It's just the cost of selling it. So they're making lots and lots of money. So it's actually induced a huge amount of fuel poverty in the UK. Now there has been an intervention by our current government, but they're refusing to tax the energy companies to pay for it. So it's actually the people of the country who will pay for it over a long period of time. So they're not getting anything for free. But also one of the other things is because also they're hell-bent obviously with development of 2 new nuclear plants. What they're actually continuing to miss is actually all the really cost-effective opportunities to actually advance action both in energy supply and dealing with a multiple of other climate and biosphere-related issues at the same time, which are incredibly cost-effective and could be introduced to Poland across. In fact, it's why I will discuss practical solutions when I'm allowed to, but incredibly cost-effective using the integration of high-tech, low-tech, and biotech together. And by that action, what actually happens is you're using today what we already have. You're not just constantly knee-jerking your way into more and more and more new innovations, which may never even happen, may never even be scalable, but you can create the gap by dealing with it now. And the UK is still missing that opportunity, even though they've been given a wonderful time to do it.
Right. Thanks, Chris, for that. You know, the main topic of this panel is to think about Central Eastern Europe, so meaning, you know, countries... Czech Republic, Lithuania, Hungary, Poland, represented at least in this panel, to see and to ask ourselves if this moment we are now in, it's really an opportunity for us, right? If this is really the green development can be an opportunity, because like what we had in the 90s, we skipped several, you know, stages of the development, for example, of the financial sector. We were very, very fast because we just, we did it, you know, after a certain time where the sector was already developed in other countries. So that's the major question of the panel. And before I put my next questions to, especially to Ricardo, because you already started to talk about it, is anyone who wants to comment or jump into the discussion we are having now? Okay, yes, we have a question there. We don't have a mic. Okay, so let me just take a mic from Chris because I need it actually. And the young gentleman over there, if you can just introduce yourself.
Hello, so my name is Victor. I'm in high school in Warsaw. And I got a question for Andrea from Hungary, because I don't know like the point of view of Hungarian people. And I just wanted to ask you how's the discussion works in your country? Like, because as it was said, in Polish you got like 2 different perspectives. Some people really want the changes in the energetic field, and some people really don't want it. So I just got a question: how is it looking in Hungary? So how's the people see the
and what is your opinion? What do you think about it?
So I'm really pro-transformation, 100%. So
see, Ricardo, that's what we are. It's not like in cases of Portugal, that it's priority number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. No, it's really a discussion going on where we should be. Andrea?
Well, to be honest, I think it's difficult to say, because up until this energy crisis that we are having right now, the Hungarian energy mix and energy situation wasn't really in the focus of political discussion in Hungary in the past few years. So just so you get a picture of the Hungarian political landscape, apart from, you know, Fidesz overwhelming everything, we do actually have 2 green parties in Hungary. They are not big parties at all, rather small parties. But to be honest, despite their, you know, them being green parties, their main identity doesn't come from green policies or being green. It's something else. It's being new, it's being different from Fidesz, being different from the Socialist Party, not being corrupt, and so on. So despite we do have green parties in Hungary, this whole sustainability, green energy really hasn't been in the focus of political discussion for the past few years. Right now, of course, it is, and there is different ways of looking at this question. As I said, one opinion is that Hungary should build this new nuclear plant to be more self-dependent when it comes to energy. The other point of view, of course, that we should invest in renewable energy and go on a more sustainable path. But I think we unfortunately are not at a point where the vast majority of the population has a really clear, defined opinion on these kind of really complicated energy questions.
So if I may jump into, just to sum up, it's in the Central European countries, there is a discussion because of, especially countries like Poland and Hungary, where the governments also have certain doubts. Or, let's put it this way, some of the politicians are even against this, maybe not totally against the transformation, but about the speed, the moment, etc. So we are in a different situation, while in Brussels, of course, taking into consideration the whole of the EU, the major, line is that that's the most important project for the European Union per se, and the war should speed up the transformation.
And just to add one last sentence to this whole question, I don't know if you heard about it, but our Minister for Foreign Affairs actually was in Russia meeting with Russian leaders, not Putin, but Russian leaders discussing energy issues. And, the reasoning behind it was that he wants to ensure that Hungary, has gas supplies from Russia. So, of course, the government is saying that, we should be more self-dependent, but there is no possibility of being, independent from Russian supply right now. So right now we have to make sure that we have those Russian supplies.
Which is, of course, a big issue within the EU member states, because Hungary is really the only member state right now where official policy is to really buy still the traditional conventional resources from Russia. And of course, it's a big issue for NATO because Hungary is also a member of NATO. And that's a question, of course, about the approach towards our enemy, which is Russia right now. Any other contribution? If not, then I would switch to Chris again and to Ricardo, because I want to hear more about convincing us, if I may ask you, how you look at Central Europe right now. You are a British European, as you said. And of course, Portugal, you mentioned these projects with Świnoujście and others. What would you say really to help us to understand that that's really the good moment, that that's really the opportunity for our region if we really jump into full speed into this transformation? Chris, maybe we'll start.
Yeah, thank you. I see this as a wonderful opportunity because I look at the diverse landscape of the nations of the CEE. From the mountains and the lakes and the hydro of Romania to the wind turbines of the Baltic.
Well, you are very poetical.
Your landscape and the people that within the culture and the history of your nations is as rich and diverse as each other, and that's why creativity is going to be so important. And how you can actually come together in it. So by looking at how, for example, if we're looking at energy supply and we're looking at the built environment, now, like, for example, in a lot of the nations here, of course, private ownership is typically very high as a walkover legacy from the Soviet era. So that would normally drag people because of cost. So we've got to look at cost as a really important factor. And so it's about also looking at maybe localized district energy supply, using a lot of the waste that isn't used at the moment to generate that. Then you can link that into so you can use some medium tech to do that, and you can start introducing some biotech into that, which rapidly raises the productivity of that, which then links to the agriculture. and food security. So we can link the energy and the food security together. The other thing is, of course, we're also now being able to lower the need of agriculture for chemical fertilizers, which means we can lower the energy needed by chemical companies, and it can actually now be spread much more against the populace. So now we're linking industry, we're linking the built environment, what we're doing is we're popularizing what actually a green transition can really look like at a local level, a district level, and a regional level, because they can actually be systemically all linked together, because they'll all operate by feedback loops. Which is how the planet works. And by feeding back across each of those spheres, what you actually then do is you're actually beginning to start generating other opportunities within the economy. So you can actually start underpinning people's skills in problem solving or raising skills and developing new skills for these localized district and regional energy centers, which we link to the agriculture, we can link to industry. And then we start linking some of those feedback loops back into the cattle and the poultry, because we can use some of the same biotech, which means we can raise the productivity of that rapidly, and then that feeds back also again into the economy. And then we can even link into, for example, cleaning of the buildings and the probiotic uses for those, which then feeds into your water systems and helps keep your water systems clean, which means you're using less energy into your water systems. And so we have feedback. And that's the kind of opportunity in a very, very short space of time that I absolutely believe that your region is an empty palette for, and it's absolutely right for it. And if you look back through your history and your culture and everything that you've actually given the world, you're creatives. And this can actually give you a position where potentially you could lead the world in how to do this really, really cost effectively. Because I know cost is going to be absolutely critical, but do it cost effectively and at a rate that's exponential above linear, where everybody else is. They're just knee-jerking their way down the same railway track. The decisions that cause the problem and the thinking that caused the problem is still being the thinking trying to apply to the answer. Well, it doesn't work like that. And this is where you have this fantastic opportunity to actually show your Western friends and partners how actually working together in a system as components of a system is actually a lot more effective, because being part of a family is always better than being strangers through a free trade agreement. I mean, for example,
being a Brit, I'm very happy to hear that. I mean,
you know, and I passionately believe that, because Aristotle said a couple of years ago that the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. Now, the thing is, Gestalt, of course, is the German philosophy where you can create the whole, which is greater than the sum of the parts. And that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the application and the practical application of systems thinking. And that's where you are. And you can do that and show everybody else how to do it.
Chris, being a Brit, I'm really impressed, by not only what you said, but also how you said so passionately. And it sounds really convincing.
Could I just make one small
Yes,
replic?
please.
Could we please kindly get back to CEE in 2022? Because I'm hearing this in utopia, and I was trying to realize how we should do it. Because we have, if your top 10 priorities is about the green development, Lithuania's, Poland's, Hungary's priorities are vastly different, and they are all at the same level. Inflation, prices, unemployment, and everything is happening at the same time. So we have to, first of all, use our time resources that we are severely lacking, and financial resources, of course, to looking at how to making at least the first step. And I don't think
That's why we have this panel today.
Yes.
Exactly.
I'm in the right place then.
All right, so Ricardo, 1986, Portugal jumped into the European communities, so far, much longer than us. So from your perspective, convince us. And we don't have so much of sun. We don't have so much. Maybe wind is better, but we definitely have different conditions. And we have a lot of coal.
Yes. Well, first of all, I want to maintain a tradition, which is Blage. This is amazing. Congratulations again for another year of Freedom Games. I say this every year that is here with us. Please do that for me. A round of applause to the organization of Freedom Games. You guys are amazing. Now,
Yes.
Let's talk about systems. And let me add something else to the system that Christopher so elegantly described, and that is the governance. And this is how I try to convince you guys. In Portugal, we have all the defects that you guys have here in Poland. Corruption, bad governance, bad incentives, bad decisions.
Are we so bad?
Until we understood that we can make a lot of money with green energy. And then, oops, all right. Then we can sell energy to our friends in Europe, German friends, our Dutch friends, our Belgian friends. There's something that maybe we go into that, which is how to make it happen.
Poland doesn't have many friends.
But still, I think that, and we were talking, me and Andrea, we were talking about that, which is the incentive for green energy is also to have energy that you can sell, or in a more romantic way, be solidarity between the European Union family. I know this is utopic, but this is what I'm trying to convince you guys, which is if you're talking with your local politicians, if you're answering a survey or something, there is money to be made in green transition. Of course, there's got to be a lot of investment before. We have Francesco Capelletti here from the European Liberal Forum. We have a paper on green hydrogen. It costs a lot to make green hydrogen, but once we have that thing scaled and ready to go, it'll be a great, great help for economy, for job, for inflation, because that's a great point, which is the priorities, but green transformation can actually help all those concerns that you guys have. So I'll keep it here unless you want to follow
Very
up.
interesting way of, convincing us, taking into consideration corruption in different ways, just to encourage us to, see it as a financial opportunity. Well, okay, I'm taking it from here, and then I'm jumping back, I want to be back to the Central Eastern Europe, to the region. And if there is no other question or contribution from the audience to what we are discussing, I want to come back to our situation, our countries, and especially with Czech Republic. Šárka, are you there? Are you following our discussion? So let's concentrate a little bit on what can be really done and what are your benchmarks, or, people like you. We are all, people supporting this transformation. So we are looking for also not only arguments, but also very concrete solutions, benchmarks, projects, inspirations. So what can you tell us? Where are you looking for inspirations and concrete projects you would like to repeat or, copy, implement in Czech Republic?
For the Czechs, maybe it's a little surprise, but whenever an individual asks where to look for some effective green development, most eyes turn to Scandinavia, particularly Denmark, Sweden, and Finland. And the one key trait that each of these nations have in terms of their green development is that it's wholeheartedly supported at the base in the community level, up through the corporate legislation. And Finland, as an example, focuses on implementing policy as the state, business and municipality level, priding itself by saying every Finn's contribution is important. And another key distinction in which the Scandinavian countries approach green development is how they look to public transit in terms of both consumption and modification. And the consumption aspect is quite simple. Biking culture is very prevalent, particularly in the case of Denmark. And the Danish government has spent significant attention to the creation of bike lines through cities such as Copenhagen. And as a result, many civilians choose to cycle on their ways about the city. And the second aspect is a little more industrious and innovative, which are the cases towards the modification of the existing transit systems. And Sweden in particular has been seen to make use of newer technologies, such as having mass centralized heating and cooling systems in major cities. Another fascinating development is the heating of Stockholm's central station, which captures body heat from over 250,000 daily commuters. And the heat is sourced into water via a heat regulator, and then the heated water is pumped to provide heating. and the cooling of the building is provided by water from the nearby Klara Lake, making maximum use of the surrounding environment. And on top of this, Sweden achieved running its public transit on a renewable energy back in 2017, even though that there was a goal for them to reach by 2025. And these Scandinavian countries have begun to form daily life and education around sustainability. And green approaches to life and industry are even beginning to be discussed in grade school to start young. And what Sweden has emphasized in recent years is that the key to sustainable economy is changing how people meet their consumer needs. And this means that every product has a mapped life cycle and that customers become users rather than owners. And this falls under the essential concept that more transitions from linear to circular economies are needed in order to achieve sustainability needs.
Thank you very much. I presume not only for Czech Republic, Scandinavia would be kind of a place we look at to look for inspiration and some concrete examples how to implement green development. So Karolina, now in Lithuania, concrete suggestions, projects, benchmark, you are...
Just bear with me. We will get to the very concrete part. I'd just like to make one turn that, oh, by golly, I thought that Lithuania had it bad, but now I see that we're still in the great situation since our government totally agrees that this is the priority for us. But so thank you for this opportunity to feel a little bit better about myself. But generally, me and the Lithuanian Free Market Institute, we find that this could be a general opportunity. Having in mind that I sign off on everything that has been told, we offer a different approach, that this should be an opportunity to renew the state itself. For example, we had a migrant crisis that we had like a huge flow of persons coming in. They were refugees, they wanted work visas and so on.
You were talking about the crisis with Belarus or?
The 5 crises before that as well. It's like we're in a consistent perpetuum mobile of crises. So the government apparatus, we'll get there, was so heavily, had such a huge workload that it actually managed to cut out like half of the functions of, accepting third world countries' residents, that it actually saved costs and the process became more efficient, and this didn't harm anything. So this is the outlook that we would suggest on applying to the whole public sector. And they are actually, I would like to humbly brag that we have, not we, but Lithuania has initiated the reform of the public sector, and it's currently in the parliamentary level. But it sort of lacks the key component to what I think needs to be most. We hear this that the state doesn't listen to the private sector enough. So I just want to for me to continue next, I have to do a little bit of empiric analysis. So imagine with the audience, please then, imagine you're coming to a cafe, you order like a nice cup of coffee, a little muffin, and you feel like a client because they smile at you. They want you to feel to come back, basically. Now, may I ask if any of you had any direct contact with a public servant or the state as such? For example, a work permit, driver's license, or anything. Could you please raise your hand if you felt treated like a client? Whoa, okay. Still, to make the record, it's not the majority. I think that 5 hands, Lithuanians would know it. You would angrily even talk like that. And
I think in Polish case, it's much better now than it was years ago. I don't know if you agree with me that the transformation of our public sector and public services is really enormous. And now we can really feel like clients in many situations, right? Is that what you feel as well? Yes, I have, yeah.
That's a particular good point because we compare the present with the past, but still there is a huge distance between the client and the state itself.
In Lithuania, there is this problem you mentioned, right? That's what you want to say.
I could find other country representatives that would agree as well. Okay, speaking particularly of Lithuania, we had a huge distance because when the state has a monopoly of certain service provision, it doesn't care about client satisfaction. And people cannot vote by leaving somewhere else. So we would suggest listening more in what the client wants and what the client needs. And what the client wants in terms of renewable energy and so on, shorter periods, more clarity, just one window to fix in your application, and then you can go build your wind panels and so on. Because now it's like it can take years until you get a permit. Like, we could achieve our set goals in Lithuania only in 5 years we could start achieving that. But all of the specialists agree that we definitely have the full potential to become an exporting country. But we need to look on how we should do it efficiently, and I strongly believe that only financial injections into the infrastructure, they would not achieve the goal in any way.
So if I understand you correctly, there is not enough, there is enough of interest from the society and business,
For sure.
but the bureaucracy and the procedures are so tough that the people or companies are discouraged to do that,
They
right?
publicly admit it and they complain about it publicly, trying to like knock through the doors of the state, but it's like, it's more convenient to like go temporarily deaf or something by the state, I guess.
Okay, thanks. So in case of Hungary, despite, the discussion you just described, where would you look for, benchmarks and projects you want to implement? And in your case, in the situation, what is really realistic to expect?
Yeah, well, I would circle back to the points that Šárka made regarding public transportation and good practices in public transportation, because if we look at the discussion in Hungary, but especially in Budapest, regarding green policies and CO2 emissions, of course, the first thing that will come to people's mind is how we go about our business, whether we use cars, whether we use buses, taxis, and so on. But the fact is that the vast majority of the CO2 emission in Budapest comes from heating and comes from the buildings, which are not properly insulated. So the problem is in Hungary that only, if the numbers are correct, only 20% of buildings in Hungary have proper insulating system, which is really, really low. For example, in Austria, and then we don't have to go as far as Scandinavia, just look at our neighboring Austria, the number is 80%. If I'm not mistaken, in Poland, it's 60%. So in the region, this is a very low number. So just to give a specific answer to that, I think in Hungary, we should look at this specific problem. And as I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion, during the past 10 years, with these price caps on energy prices, people were not encouraged to be more energy sufficient and build energy sufficient houses, energy sufficient buildings. So this also contributed to this problem.
Thank you.
Could I just contextual remark as well? Lithuania decided not to put a little bit anti-market measures as putting on caps on the prices, because we significantly the state focuses on promoting rational use of electronical resources and energy resources and suggest saving more, because this would giving caps, the amount of the money that's the surplus would be covered from the taxpayers' money, and I believe that there are like better ways to invest that, and generally that's the way that we see it moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know if there is anyone from the audience who would like to comment on the Poland's situation, where we are at that, path. Well, I can add from my perspective, definitely we started late as a society, and we are going towards this direction slowly, but I would say the people are divided. Some people are very much into this and want to do it. Recycling, energy efficiency, thinking about now because of the crisis, reducing heating at home, looking forward to be prosumers, even thinking about buying all this installation on the roofs. And there are also the other group of people who are not really keen to do anything, and they just want to continue the way they did earlier. If I'm correct, I don't know if anyone wants to correct me or add to this perspective anything from the audience. I guess there are mostly Polish people here. Maybe I'm wrong. Who is from Poland in the group? Yeah, I guess so. Okay, anyway, I would say we are in transition. And of course, politicians play a very important role in this transition. But also, in the same time, the other factors, like the war, like the crisis, and like also the EU projects and the EU vision, makes an important impact. So now, coming back to Ricardo and Chris, I would like to see, what would be your prediction, because you are a think tanker, both of you, by the way. What can happen now? Because the war is not finished. The energy crisis, we are just in the midst of it. Winter is coming. This will be a difficult winter, everybody
Reminds
knows.
me of something.
Yeah, so I understand that people in Western Europe, I still consider the UK to be Western Europe, not the alien, distant global Britain, but still the European country. So in the West, we think in the Central Eastern Europe that you are very, let's say, lazy, rich. You're not willing to sacrifice anything. You like your...
I'll take the lazy, you'll take the rich.
You like,
You have the
during
money and we have the sun.
summer, you like AC to be switched on maybe as a population, no? During summer when it's very hot in Portugal. So the truth is we are all paying, and especially, Western societies, not really used to bad times. Are you able to sacrifice a lot for this transition or not?
Fantastic question. Let me just circle back to investments, because again, this is something that I can give to the audience and to my friends in Poland. Once you convince your governance to start investing in green energy, then start investing in infrastructure so that we can spread that energy. And for example, Andrea, Hungary is like, oh, we can only turn to Russia to have natural gas. That is not true. We actually have natural gas coming from Bulgaria. We have natural gas coming from Poland. So invest in that infrastructure. And even if it's investing, and this is my final point, investing in gas infrastructure, that's fine, because then we can retrofit those pipelines to hydrogen. Once we start producing hydrogen, we can start injecting hydrogen in former gas pipelines. Now, to answer your question, which is a very provocative one, so where are we going?
Really?
And we, the lazy ones, and the rich ones, which is Christopher, how do we do that? What?
No one told me.
How much can we do? Well, there's injustice in the system. In Portugal, we have actually like 2 weeks of winter. So that's good for us. But I can tell you, and I can tell my friends in Central Eastern Europe, we are solidary and we'll make the efforts that we have to do so that our brothers and sisters in Ukraine and in Poland and in Hungary and Lithuania have the conditions for a good life. That is something that I can tell you the Portuguese people are behind it. Actually, one of the engines for all this shifting, because in Portugal, as you were saying, we're lazy. We have things going slowly and calmly because we can go to the outdoor cafe and spend the afternoon just chatting. Now it's like full speed ahead. Why full speed ahead? Because our European friends need our help. Of course, there's money to be made, but we need to help. Portugal needs to help. Either it's with an entry point for natural gas, for liquefied gas, and then send it to hydrogen, which is we're investing millions and millions of euros in green hydrogen production, on renewables, on electricity. So we are here to help our friends, and we will do effort for that, and we will compromise and sacrifice for that. I can guarantee you from my country.
What a pity that Prime Minister of Portugal, maybe one day. But that sounds very great. Thank you for this declaration. Okay, Chris.
Great. So the question is, what can we as a nation do to help everybody else?
Also, how far, your society is able really to sacrifice your own, habits and nice life you are having. Let's put it this way.
Okay. Well,
maybe
we should put some context on this. The gap between rich and poor has never actually been wider in the UK than ever before. Even Charles Dickens would be a little bit on the horrified side.
That was tough. I would argue, okay.
But yes, but it's all about relativeness and it's all about context. So I do get the point of the question. Well, there are a lot of sacrifices that the nation can certainly be making. And like Portugal, we invest vast sums of money into the new technologies, which hopefully will make a positive contribution into the future. Now some of those technologies are soaking up billions and billions of pounds on a dream that hopefully one day they will A, actually work, and B, actually be scalable, so they can become practical. But also we have some amazing universities doing some amazing work at the smaller scale. Which also can, when actually combined into systems, so instead of looking at single technologies, you can actually combine that high-tech, low-tech, and biotech together. And then those can become extremely innovative, which can then be passed on, and everyone will be able to have the utility of.
I'm asking also because, you know, that there is that general point of view of Central Eastern European countries, those who joined the European project later, that we have many more issues in front of us, many more investments to be done, especially in, let's say, energy sector and all this Green Deal, right? And someone has to pay for it. And of course, we think it's not only us who have to pay because we will be not able to implement it. Sorry. And especially in the time of war, when we have an extra effort to do. So you mentioned solidarity, and that's also something we are mentioning. We thinking about Central Eastern European countries. What is also, we call it Eastern flank now, or Eastern front in a sense of, you know, war in Ukraine. So it's very important to hear that we are all on the same page, we are all in the same boat, and we are trying to, you know, speed up this green transformation. Let's just hope that this will happen despite the crisis we are all heading to. And that's the last chance also to you, if there is anyone for a comment or question from the floor. Yes, please. Yes. Okay. Maybe I would prefer another mic.
Yeah, just a comment, maybe for a
Just introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Francesco from ELF, that been mentioned by
I know, but
Ricardo gently. Yeah. From European Liberal Forum, maybe
and
for another.
Italy, right?
I'm from Florence, yes. For another maybe ELF hub or for another ELF panel, maybe we can also think about because states are different, and I mean, it's fine to not be an exporting country in terms of energy because capabilities can be different, can be naturally, can be a country where you can achieve 80% of solar energy or wind energy, and some other country where there is no time to speak. Or some other country where, you know, you're technological, at the forefront of a technology. But what I want to say is we should have a level playing field in terms of regulation, so that the regulation are harmonized, so that any technology and any forthcoming ideas to achieve sustainable and green goals and green deals are even in Europe, in the
and
world.
I'm very happy to hear that from an Italian, when Italy is just having a new government with a very interesting coalition. So I just wonder how this government with the prime minister will influence the thinking in Italy, especially of the government. What will be the, you know, approach to this green transition? Do you expect any moves from the new government towards that?
Green transition might be in every political agenda, but it should be that there are costly trade-off in transition, as has been mentioned by Chris. And implementing technologies is difficult, is costly, and it should be feasible for the industry. If it's feasible for the industry, it will be feasible for the government at some point, because there are certain capabilities of pushing towards, and that's what I can suggest. You know, if you can't convince your government, like it's happening in Italy, maybe we will be victim of the rule of law mechanism soon because of the new situation. But if you can't convince that the government is, you know, is deaf, maybe you can start from NGOs and go to the industry and have a bottom-up approach.
Well, we can convince the government. We can always change the government like you did. You just changed the
But
government.
do it for the good, not like us.
Okay, anyway, let's close down. If there is no other comment or question from anyone, let's wrap up. Thank you very much for this discussion. I hope it was interesting. We are different countries in different situations, but we all know one thing. Despite winter is coming and it will be difficult, we have to really use this opportunity also for Europe, because one thing which is certain is that Europe doesn't have enough of conventional sources of energy, gas, coal, oil. We just don't have enough. So it's the only way for us to be independent, to jump into this green development. There is no other way. Otherwise, we will be dependent, if not from Russia, then from the other partners, even from the US. We would be now hesitating to be completely dependent. So let's think about, being completely free, and let's just think about this transition as a source of our security for the future. Thank you very much.
It's not always easy to recognize. It may look like this, or like this. It may be a burden, but it is a responsibility that we embrace nonetheless. But if it means this for one person and this for someone else, maybe it ultimately means being there for one another. It isn't handed to us, but we know where to find it and how it feels, how it tastes, and what it sounds like when we finally have it. It means different things to different people, but for many, it means everything. And if we all fight for it, it will eventually bring us together.
Ihre Ausreise